Number 1. Chitlins, cleaned by hand in a tin wash tub in a cold backyard. Boiled for hours with an onion and a pot of red pepper until the whole street knew what was cooking. This was 1979 in a lot of houses, one of the last dishes still holding on, while everything else in the kitchen was starting to come out of a box. James is going to walk you through 25 of these dishes tonight. And family, I want you to understand something before we even start. These recipes did not disappear because they went out of style. They disappeared because somebody decided the story they told wasn't the story America wanted to sell you. There was a sound you could hear coming out of a black kitchen in the South in 1970 that you will not hear today. It was the sound of a hog maw being scraped clean at 4 in the morning. It was the sound of grease popping in a skillet that had seasoned itself over 30 years. It was the sound of a woman singing low while she stirred a pot that had 4 different things in it because that's all there was, and she was going to make it taste like more than that. Somewhere between 1970 and 1980, that sound got quiet. Not because the people stopped loving each other, because the food industry moved in with something faster, something whiter, something that came in a box with a smiling cartoon on the front. And it told an entire generation that what they grew up eating was something to be embarrassed about. I don't believe that. I never have. And tonight, family, we are going to bring these 25 dishes back out into the light, one at a time, starting near the edge of the decade where some of you might still remember, and going all the way back down into the parts of the 1970s that almost nobody talks about anymore. Hey family, I'm James, and what we're doing tonight is a little different than usual. We're not just remembering, we're digging. We're going back through the 1970s, year by year, peeling back what got covered up first and what got buried deepest. Some of these dishes you might still catch a whiff of at a family reunion. Others, child. Others got erased so clean that half the young folks in your own family have never even heard the name. Before we get into it, if this is your first time sitting with me, go on and hit that subscribe button right now. This channel is where we keep these memories from disappearing for good. Hit it, ring the bell, and let's go back. Number 1. Chitlins. Done the right way, the slow way. By 1979, in a lot of black households, chitlins had become what folks called the last one, the one dish still standing while the freezer filled up with frozen dinners. Cleaning them took half a day. You ran them under cold water again and again, you picked through them by hand, no shortcuts, and then you set them on the stove with an onion, a bay leaf, a little vinegar, and you let the whole house smell like Christmas Eve, even if it was a random Tuesday in March. My granddaddy used to say a woman who could clean chitlins right and season them so the whole block came sniffing around your porch. That woman had a gift the Lord didn't hand out to just anybody. Folks don't do this anymore, and that's a shame, because what got lost wasn't just a dish. It was a whole afternoon of women in one kitchen, laughing, telling each other's business, teaching a daughter without ever calling it a lesson. Number 2. Pig feet. Soused down in vinegar and hot peppers until they turned that deep pink red color and sat in a mason jar on the counter for anybody passing through to grab one. Wrap it in wax paper and eat it standing up at the sink. This was 1978 kitchen wisdom. Nothing on that hog went to waste. Not the feet, not the ears, not the tail. Now, Big Mama, she used to say, a family that throws away the feet don't deserve the rest of the hog. That wasn't a joke to her. That was theology. When the supermarket started stocking pre-trimmed cuts wrapped in plastic, the feet disappeared from the shelf first, because there was no profit in a piece of meat that mostly required patience instead of money. Number 3. Smothered oxtails, browned first in a cast iron skillet until the fat rendered down dark, then set low with onion and bell pepper, and just enough water to make a gravy thick enough to stand a spoon up in. By 1977, this was Sunday food, but it was also a Tuesday of times were tight food, because oxtail was cheap back then. Cheap because white folks wouldn't touch it. That's the truth nobody wants to say out loud, family. The same cut of meat that restaurants charge you $35 for today was considered garbage in 1977, and black women turned garbage into Sunday dinner so good that men would skip church to make sure they got home in time to eat it hot. Number 4. Hog maw, split open, cleaned, and stuffed. Rice, greens, sometimes a little sausage if the money allowed it. then sewed shut with kitchen thread and simmered for hours until the whole thing was tender enough to slice like a loaf. This is 1976 now, family, and I need you to sit with this one a minute because hog maw is one of those dishes that's almost extinct. You will not find it on a menu. You will not find a recipe card for it in a modern cookbook. It survived purely because somebody's grandmother refused to let it die, teaching it hand to hand, kitchen to kitchen, with no measurements and no written instructions, just watching and doing until you had it in your hands the same way she had it in hers. Number 5, souse meat, what some folks called hog head cheese, made from the head, the feet, sometimes the ears, boiled down low and slow until the meat fell off clean, then packed into a loaf pan with vinegar and pepper and set in the icebox to firm up overnight. Sliced thin the next morning for breakfast, family, right alongside a biscuit and a cup of coffee. This was 1975, and I want you to understand what this dish represents. It represents a people who were handed the parts nobody else wanted and turned it into something with enough dignity to serve on a Sunday table. That right there, that's something we need to bring back, not because we're desperate anymore, but because we owe it to the people who made a feast out of what they were given. Number 6, fried chicken gizzards over dirty rice. The gizzards cleaned, boiled tender first, then dredged and fried crisp, served on top of rice cooked down with the giblets, the liver, a little onion, a little cayenne. Now this was 1975 kitchen economy at its finest. A whole chicken went further, in a black household in the 70s, than most families today get out of 3 chickens, because every single piece had a job. The breast fed the children, the wings went to whoever got there first, and the gizzards, the gizzards were for whoever earned them, usually the man of the house coming home tired from a double shift. Number 7, chicken feet soup, simmered for hours with onion, garlic, a little vinegar to break down the collagen until the broth went thick and rich enough to coat a spoon. By 1974, in some households, this was medicine as much as it was dinner. Folks believed it was good for your joints, good for a cold coming on, good for whatever ailed you. Nobody had insurance that covered much of anything back then, so the kitchen was the first pharmacy and the last one too. You won't see that today. Today, folks throw the feet in the trash without a second thought, not knowing their own great-grandmother would have looked at that and called it a sin. Number 8, neck bones and butter beans, cooked down together until the meat was falling off the bone and the beans had soaked up all that smoky richness. This was 1974 Tuesday night food, the kind of meal that stretched across 3 or 4 servings out of one pot. Family gathered around a table with a plastic cloth on it, a transistor radio playing something low in the background. We didn't have much, but we had everything that mattered, and a pot of neck bones and butter beans on a cold night proved it every single time. Now, before we keep going, family, I want to hear from you. Somewhere in your family, there's a dish just like these, something made from parts nobody talks about anymore, something that fed a whole household on almost nothing. What was it in your family? Drop it in the comments below. Tell me the name of it. Tell me who made it. I read every single one, and I promise you, somebody else reading the comments is going to see their own grandmother in your words. Number 9, smoked mullet and grits, the fish smoked over a backyard fire pit, or bought fresh off a man selling out the back of his truck on a Friday afternoon. Flaked apart and stirred right into a pot of stone-ground grits until the whole thing turned rich and smoky. This is 1973 now, family, and we're getting into territory that most folks under 50 have never even heard of. Smoked mullet was coastal soul food, Georgia, the Carolinas, the Gulf, and it fed entire communities that lived close enough to water to catch their own protein when the grocery store prices got too high to bear. Number 10, croaker fish fry, wrapped up hot in wax paper straight out of the skillet, sold 2 for $0.25 out the side window of somebody's house on a Friday night. This was 1973 too, and I need you to picture this. An entire neighborhood economy built around one woman's fry pan. She didn't have a restaurant license. She didn't need one. She had a hot skillet, a line of neighbors, and a reputation nobody could buy their way into. That's the whole block right there, fed on trust and hot oil and word of mouth. Number 11, turtle stew, made from a snapper, caught out of a creek or a pond, cleaned and cut down, cooked low with tomato, onion, and whatever pepper was growing in the garden that year. By 1972, this dish was already fading in most cities, but out in the rural South it held on stubborn because it cost nothing but time and a fishing line. My granddaddy worked 6 days a week and never once complained, and on that seventh day, if the creek was generous, this is what ended up on the table. Proof that a family could eat like royalty off of nothing but patience and the land they'd been left with. Number 12. Rabbit and gravy over rice. The meat browned and slow cooked in a dark roux until it was tender enough to shred with a fork. This is 1972 too, family, back when small game wasn't a novelty. It was just Tuesday. A man with a good aim and a little bit of land could keep his family fed for a week, off what most folks today wouldn't even think to look at. That was just how it was done, and there was no shame in it. There was pride in it. Now, family, let me stop right here for a second, because I've got to tell you something real quick before we go any further. These 12 dishes, this is just what we managed to pull back together. There's so much more that got lost. Recipes that walked out of this world with the last person who remembered them, because nobody ever wrote them down. That's why I put together the Soul Roots Cookbook, 100 Forgotten Black American Recipes, written out complete, the way Big Mama would have done it, with the measurements and the little secrets she never wrote on paper, because she carried them in her hands instead. The link is in the description and pinned in the comments. You can also scan the code on your screen right now if that's easier for you. Don't let these recipes disappear the way so many already have. Number 13. Poke salad, what some called poke salad. The young leaves of a wild plant that grew along fences and ditches, boiled twice to pull the bitterness out, then cooked down slow with a piece of fat back until it turned tender and rich. This is 1971 now, family, and this dish tells you everything about the resourcefulness that ran through these kitchens. A plant that grew wild and free, that most folks today would walk right past. Fed entire families through the lean stretch of early spring when the garden hadn't come in yet, and the money from the last harvest was running thin. Number 14. Hog jowl and black-eyed peas, cooked together on New Year's Day for luck and money in the coming year. The jowl rendering its fat down into the peas until the whole pot turned rich and smoky. By 1971, this was tradition carried straight down from slavery-era kitchens, unbroken, unchanged, still being made the exact same way it had been made 100 years before. Child, let me tell you something. That's not a coincidence. That's a people who understood that some things you don't change, because changing them means forgetting where you came from. Number 15. Ash cake. A simple cornmeal batter wrapped in cabbage leaves or foil and baked directly in the hot coals of the fireplace or the yard fire, pulled out steaming and split open with butter melting straight into it. This is 1970 now. Family, the very front edge of the decade, and already this dish was on its way out even then. A holdover from a much older time that only the oldest women in the house still remembered how to make right. You won't see that today. Most folks alive right now have never once eaten bread cooked directly in fire. And there's a whole sensory memory that just doesn't exist anymore because of it. Number 16. Kush kush. Cornmeal fried down in a skillet with a little water until it formed soft, crumbly curds, served with cane syrup or buttermilk poured right over the top. This one goes back to 1972, deep Louisiana and Mississippi kitchens. A breakfast that cost pennies and filled a whole family up before a long day of work. This right here, this is something we need to bring back, not the poverty that birthed it, but the ingenuity. The way a handful of cornmeal and a little bit of patience could turn into something a child would grow up craving 50 years later. Number 17. Hominy and side meat. The corn soaked and treated down until it turned soft and pearled, then simmered with a chunk of salt pork until the fat worked its way through every single kernel. Early 1970s kitchen staple. Family, the kind of dish that never made it onto a restaurant menu because it was never meant to impress anybody. It was meant to fill a belly and stretch a dollar. And it did both without complaint every single time. Number 18. Liver pudding, some called it liver mush. Made from hog liver and cornmeal and just enough seasoning to make it sing, formed into a loaf, sliced and fried crisp for breakfast alongside eggs. This dish held on strong through the early 70s in the Carolinas especially, family. But it's another one that's nearly vanished from black kitchens today, even though it used to be as common as bacon. Family, I've got to stop one more time here, because we are deep into the buried part of this decade now, and I don't want you to miss what's sitting right there in the description box below this video. The Soul Roots Cookbook has 100 of these recipes, completely written out. Every tip Big Mama would have whispered while she cooked, included right there on the page. I know some of you are thinking, I'll ask my mama, I'll ask my auntie, I'll write it down one of these days. Family, I've been doing this long enough to know that one of these days sometimes never comes. The people who still remember how to make these dishes are getting older every single year, and when they go, if nobody wrote it down, it goes with them. You can keep relying on memory alone, or you can have it all in one place, preserved the right way, starting today. The link is in the description and pinned right up top in the comments. Scan the code on the screen if that's easier. I did my part putting this together. The rest is yours. Number 19. Tripe stew, the stomach lining cleaned meticulously and simmered for hours with tomato, onion, and a good dose of pepper until it turned tender enough to melt on the tongue. This dish sits right at the edge of what most people today would even try, family, and that's exactly the point. It took real skill, real patience, and a real understanding of how to transform something difficult into something worth gathering around. That's not something a cookbook alone teaches you. That's something you learn standing next to somebody who already knows. Number 20. Turnip green stems, cooked separate from the leaves themselves, chopped fine and simmered down with fat back and a splash of pepper vinegar until they turn tender and rich in a way most folks never even knew was possible. Now, this right here is the deepest kind of forgotten family, a dish born entirely out of refusing to throw anything away. The stems most people today toss straight in the trash. A black grandmother in 1970 looked at that and said, "No, ma'am, there's a meal in there too." And she was right every single time. If this is bringing something back for you, family, go on and hit that like button right now. Subscribe so you're here with me every single time we do this. And drop a comment for me. Out of these 20 dishes, which one did your own family still make, even after everybody else's kitchen had already moved on? I want to know. Tell me the name, tell me who made it, and let's give these women the credit they were never given anywhere else. Number 21. Gumbo's Herbs, a green gumbo made from whatever greens the garden gave up that week. Mustard, turnip, collard, sometimes 7 or 9 different kinds all cooked down together. A tradition that stretched all the way back to Louisiana Black Catholic kitchens, made especially around Lent. By 1970, this dish still carried real weight in certain communities. A dish so labor-intensive that making it was itself an act of devotion, hours of chopping and simmering that no modern kitchen would ever agree to anymore. Number 22. Buttermilk cornbread, baked in a cast-iron skillet that had been seasoned for 30 years. Poured in sizzling and pulled out with a crust the color of a copper penny, split open while it was still too hot to touch. Simple, family. But simple doesn't mean small. This bread sat at the center of nearly every single meal we've talked about tonight. The thing that made a pot of beans into a full dinner. The thing a child learned to make before they learned much of anything else in that kitchen. Number 23. Sweet potato biscuits, the dough-colored deep orange from the mashed potato worked right into the flour, baked until golden and served hot with cane syrup poured over the top until it soaked all the way through. This was a dish reserved for special mornings, family, Sunday, a holiday, a homecoming. The kind of biscuit that told you, without anybody saying a word, that today mattered more than most days did. Number 24, family. And we are almost to the bottom of this decade now, all the way down to where almost nothing survived except in the oldest memories left. Ash cake's cousin, cane syrup tea cakes, small, dense, barely sweet cookies made with sorghum syrup instead of sugar because sugar cost money and sorghum grew right there in the yard. Rolled by hand, baked in batches, handed out to grandchildren the second they came up on the porch. This dish is nearly gone completely, family. I had to go looking hard to even confirm it was real. And that right there tells you everything about how close we came to losing this whole decade of memory for good. Number 25. And family, this last one isn't a recipe at all. It's the table itself. Because underneath every single dish we talked about tonight, the chitlins, the pig feet, the turtle stew, the ash cake, there was one thing holding it all together. And that was a Sunday table crowded with people who loved each other, plates passed hand to hand, somebody's grandmother standing at the stove making sure nobody left hungry, no matter how little there was to go around. The industrial food that moved in during the 70s didn't just replace the recipes. It replaced the table. It replaced the gathering. It gave us convenience and took something a whole lot more valuable in return. That's what I want you to sit with tonight, family. These 25 dishes weren't lost by accident. They were pushed out by a food industry that had no use for a story about black genius born out of scarcity, and by a country that found it easier to sell you a box with a cartoon on it than to sell you the truth about who really built the American table. Every single one of these recipes was proof of ingenuity, proof of love, proof that a people handed almost nothing, turned it into a feast, generation after generation, without ever once asking for credit. We didn't have much, but we had everything that mattered, and what mattered most wasn't the meat or the meal. It was the hands that made it, and the people gathered around to eat it. Folks don't do this anymore, and that's a shame. But tonight, for however long this video played, you gotta sit at that table again. You gotta smell that kitchen again. And that, right there, that's something worth bringing back. One memory at a time. Share this one with somebody in your family who still remembers a dish just like these and hasn't written it down yet. This might be the nudge they need before it's too late. Subscribe, because next time, we're going somewhere just as real as tonight. I'll see you next time, family.
Going somewhere just as real as tonight, a scene from the story of cane syrup.